When you come to work at Bauer, whether it's engineering or in the shop, people know what our values are. Our employees know, and they have a passion for all that, for understanding our customer and treating each other with respect, but really understanding what it means to serve our customers.
Hey, this is a quick reminder to listen to our Made in America podcast on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our special releases, updates, or highlights. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Mark Auletta, COO of Bauer. Mark was with me on the ACM podcast, and I'm now super happy to have him on for a full episode. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Ari, thanks for having me.
Well, it's literally my pleasure and the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same two questions, Mark. What do you make, and why do you make it?
So we design and manufacture aircraft component test equipment, and we sell to airlines, overhaul shops, OEMs, and the military worldwide. We've been around 105 years, and we have equipment, I would guess, in 75 countries around the world.
Global footprint, doing a lot of test stands. So we'll get into sort of the what and kind of review that with the audience, make sure everyone kind of knows what it's all about, because it's really interesting what you guys do. Real history, family business. So we've got some interesting wood to chop there, as it were. You've got an interesting background. But let's talk about the why. Why does Bauer do what it does?
Well, put it simply, to keep airplanes flying safely. Because whether it's a jet engine, an aircraft, or a helicopter, at 30,000 feet, 5,000 feet, there's no margin for error. Mm-hmm. They just have to run flawlessly all the time. So we design and manufacture flight safety solutions, and there's a genuine need for it, and there always has been. So the standards are really high, not just here in the U.S., but worldwide.
And so let's talk a little bit about what that means. So when you make the test equipment, for people that don't, probably everyone listening has flown and will again fly on a plane. So we appreciate the safety that your product provides. But not everyone maybe understands what goes into that safety. So maybe explain, what is it really that you guys make?
It's really incredible. I think that's a great point. People get on a plane and just assume it's going to stay in the air and it's going to fly safely. Or if you're a fighter pilot, same thing. Or if you're flying a plane, maybe cargo. Mm-hmm. So key critical components on an aircraft: fuel controls, fuel pumps, hydraulic actuators, things that make the wings move, motors that are used for steering. Imagine a jet fighter, landing, and there's a motor attached to the nose wheel, and it has to function not occasionally, right? But it has to function perfectly every single time. Yes. And the same thing that with fuel control, maybe delivering fuel to the engine. So all these critical components, periodically, after thousands of hours, are taken off of the aircraft and tested back to their original equipment manufacturer specifications. So think about flow, pressure, temperature, even altitude. That's what our test equipment is designed to test.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We all of us operate, most of us, right, a piece of heavy equipment almost every day, which is a car. And we're so used to the idea that we drive our car and then eventually something doesn't work and we take it to go see somebody and then they fix it. Well, we've got four wheels on the ground. We sort of have the option of doing that, but you can't afford to have, the hydraulic actuator on your tail fin stop working right, when you're coming in for a landing. So sounds like what we're making here at Bauer is the equipment that allows us to sort of test that at intervals to make sure that it doesn't fail in actual service.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it can't just operate good, right? It has to operate perfectly, just like it was out of the box, right? Just like brand new.
So what goes into making this type of equipment? What kind of technology goes into it? How much thought process is it? Is it pretty simple stand? You just put something on it and it runs? You measuring it? Give us the kind of sense.
It's complex. Very, very sophisticated, right? And so we start our first of all, about 100 employees and about 40 engineers. So percentage-wise, and then there's 30, 35 in manufacturing, the rest in support functions. But if you think about 40 engineers, mechanical, electrical, software engineers, and it's a lot of time. Months go into the design. So we'll start by understanding the customer's requirements. These are custom solutions, right?
So every stand is bespoke?
Every stand is unique in many respects. There's some standardization from one fuel control stand to the next, particularly if the capabilities are the same. So think about an engine manufacturer, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, General Electric, all different manufacturers, and then they all maybe use different fuel controls or fuel pumps, right? Different makes out there. And so if you look at any given customer, maybe Delta Airlines, they'll have a fleet of couple hundred aircraft, but they're all somewhat different. There's commonality, but it's in Delta Airlines is going to be different than Ethiopian Airlines, different than Lufthansa, German airline. So we'll start by understanding the customer's fleet, what they're trying to test, and then we use what's called a component maintenance manual. So let's take, for example, that fuel control. There's a component maintenance manual, and then we go right to the test specifications, and we will, in essence, reverse engineer. So we'll look at the capabilities, flow, pressure, temperature, altitude for that component, design a test stand that has the capability to satisfy that component, but maybe 12, 15, or 20 different components for that particular stand. So very unique. We'll, to some extent, leverage what we've done all these years, best practices, but largely they're very customized.
And so when you make one, so you mentioned Delta Airlines, so I'll just mention that.
Sure.
I don't know if that's a real example or not, but that doesn't matter.
It is.
It is. Okay, great. So there you go, household name. So Delta probably has a number of different planes in their fleet, right? So regional jets, whatever. Yeah. So, and then those jets have different engines per plane. So do you make one stand that's going to test my entire fleet, or am I making multiple stands, each stand for each type of test? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it depends, right? It's situational. Generally, our test equipment falls into one of three buckets: fuel, hydraulic, or pneumatic. But even a fuel control stand is going to be specific to certain capabilities, certain components for Delta and for their fleet. But it gets very specific. We have a test stand right now. It's for a valve that is the customer actually happens to be right here in West Hartford, called Triumph. It used to be Chandler Evans in Triumph. So this valve is used for a helicopter rotor to make the rotor blade act accordingly or in a certain way. That valve is specific to one Chinook helicopter, and so one component on that helicopter. So incredible. Now it happens to be somewhat of a smaller test stand, but it does get very, very specific.
Gotcha. And then these then get deployed all over the world. That's why you guys have locations everywhere?
We do. Now our headquarters is in Bristol, Connecticut, but we have some employees that live in different parts of the world, including a full-time employee, an engineer over in China. And then we use a network of both sales and service in various parts of the world too. So we'll leverage those individuals, or we'll have our engineers fly to the customer, and it could be anywhere in the world.
And so what about like with this test stand maintenance, right? I mean, do you guys have a fleet of service people that travel around the world maintaining these test stands?
We do. We have a customer support group. So actually my nephew, Michael, is our vice president of global aftermarket and customer support. And he manages a team that's based in Bristol, and they will travel the world. And they'll get involved with startups, installation, commissioning of a new test stand, but also repairs, modifications, upgrades to existing test stands.
Sounds like a really interesting gig, traveling the world there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the way I pitch it to, let's say, a younger engineer or someone just graduating college who's interested in joining Bauer. You can design this really complex test stand, electromechanical test stand. You can work with our manufacturing team to actually see what you've designed get built and support the assembly and manufacturing process. Work with the customer, so the customer typically comes in for a week or two of factory acceptance before the test stand is shipped, and then travel the world to any one of these countries all over. So versus maybe you're going to be an engineer working for a larger company and design a widget that you may never see get made.
Yeah, right? You might be spent all this time on the widget. You've only ever seen it on blueprints and never ever get to see it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So
has that been an appealing sales pitch for?
Really appealing, right? It's really it sells itself.
Yeah,
and so I'm a little biased, obviously, but it's great, and it's our engineers are very hands-on, so they'll spend a good amount of time behind a desk, working with SolidWorks, working with CAD software, and actually doing the design work and understanding the specifications and all that. But they're on the shop floor too, especially during checkout, and they might spend weeks, if not months, when the test stand is finished to verify it and actually run components and make sure that it operates the way it was intended to.
That's pretty cool. You get like a whole kind of cradle to grave experience. Are you recruiting engineers? Are these typically people that are starting at Bauer? You recruiting a lot of folks that are like kind of getting out of engineering school from the ground up? Or are you looking for folks with experience? What does it take to work at Bauer?
Both. I would say we've had the most success recruiting new graduates. So we have a great relationship with the University of Hartford. My brother Lou, who's president and CEO of Bauer, is on the board for the School of Engineering there. And in fact, our family and Bauer just donated a room in their new Hersey Center, which is a new School of Engineering on campus. So we're very proud to be part of that and have our name on that room. But we've had tremendous success. I think we have 8 of our engineers who graduated the University of Hartford. Many of them started as summer interns. Mm-hmm. And so they'll work at Bauer for maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, and see if it's a fit. And we, assess whether they're a fit for the organization. It's really been a win-win situation to do that.
So it's really interesting. I want to pull on that thread a little bit because it's something that I've been trying to kind of get a lot of manufacturers to think more about, which is to really engage with the educational platforms. Why do people rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Well, if I'm looking to find new engineers, might as well partner up with a university because that's where the new engineers are.
Right.
And getting that kind of those people going in the summer, getting them started, get them a real opportunity to see, feel, and experience the uniqueness of a business. And then they get a trial run, you get a trial run. Seems like you guys have embraced that. Is that a fair characterization?
Absolutely. And, we'll get involved with, like at the University of Hartford, I personally have done resume boot camps there.
Really?
So to get to meet, maybe a dozen of their undergraduates, and then I get to choose who maybe I want to come in and interview for a summer internship. But it's through, I just had someone call me yesterday, and it was someone through our hometown down in Clinton who's part of the church, and they're an engineering student, sophomore year, and he's going to come in over the holidays to interview with us for a summer internship. So, it doesn't have to be just University of Hartford. We have relationships with UConn, with Quinnipiac, with CCSU, but it really is it's a great way to bring in that talent.
How does that, has that been something you guys have done for a long time? So just for people out there that are listening, that are like, damn, this is such a good idea. I've heard about it before, but I never executed. How long have you guys been doing it? How did you sort of get it off the ground? And let me kind of frame it like this a little bit. Feel free to go away from my frame. But, I wonder if part of the success is doing it with intention. Not just sort of getting a summer intern and throwing them in and figure it out, but do you have a program where they maybe get partnered up with a mentor, or you've got certain projects that they get assigned to, is there a sort of a process that you've embraced to sort of make it successful? How do you guys do it?
Yeah, so we've done it for years, probably 10, 15 years. We've had internship programs, and we don't go too crazy with it, right? Because we're a small company, 100 people, so it's anywhere from maybe 2 to 5 summer interns. But in the last, I'd say, 4 years, it's more of a structured program. So sometimes it's underwinging a more senior engineer. 2 years ago, we took 5 summer interns of various disciplines, EE, ME, software, and we put them on a group project, which was really cool. Because then they got to almost like being in a group project at school, but they got to work with each other, their kids their age, work with our engineers, understand our processes, and they upgraded one of our products by over the course of the summer. They took it from design all the way through manufacturing and checkout, just like as if it was a production project at Bauer.
No kidding.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was very successful.
And the resulting product that they made was something that you guys
We're selling today. It was an existing product.
Yeah, I understand. It's an upgrade,
right?
too.
And it needed an upgrade, and which involved some software updates, some design updates. They were, using the CAD SolidWorks software to do it. It was very hands-on, and then they watched it being built and supported that too.
That must have been really, really fun for them.
It was great.
And it drove a ton of value for you guys. That's probably one of those, I'm now guessing a little bit, but it seems like one of those projects that's sort of like on the board, like, hey, when we get to it, someone really needs to run this upgrade, but it's hard to like get that to make it to the top of the list. So now you get some interns, bring them in, great thing for them to sink their teeth into. Probably, am I kind of hitting the nail on the head?
No, you're right. And, it's an investment, right? So
Sure.
it takes time, and we understand that we're taking maybe some of our senior engineers and they have to devote some of their time
Sure.
during that summer to mentor these
Yeah.
individuals too.
Well, that's a really interesting opportunity. I think it goes without saying, but just to put the fine point on it, sounds like it's been a huge success, and anyone that was thinking about doing it and partnering up with schools like that, you'd highly recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the keys to it, like how would a company even venture into this space? I'd suggest one of the first things they think about is developing a relationship with a local college, a local university. And because then you'll get to know people in their career center, career development center, and you can, get involved with things like a resume boot camp and get to know the students.
Got to invest your time to get the return out. It's not going to happen for you.
That's right.
But it's absolutely worth doing it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. How did you guys? How have you found the test stand business through kind of the challenges we've had of late with the aerospace business? You guys manage that okay?
We have. We've done fine through this whole pandemic, if you will. One of the biggest changes for us has been the not having customers be able to visit us, especially during factory acceptance, because they would come almost always for a week or two. And we've had to resort to virtual factory acceptance. So we are pretty good now at recordings and in WebEx and video conferencing, using that software, interactive with the customer, and it's amazing. It's not as good as being in person, but we've managed to get through successful factory acceptance, ship the stand. Likewise, we haven't been able to send our engineers on site.
Right.
That's a bit more challenging, right? Because a lot of times our engineers will go to the customer for maybe a couple of weeks, if not longer, of training. So to try to train operators virtually, it's possible. We've done it, but it's clunky. It takes longer. It's not nearly as efficient. And you're missing something versus being in person. But all in all, we've managed just fine. Fortunately, as we talked, we have a mix of commercial and military work. Heading into the pandemic, it was about 70% military and 30% commercial. I'd like to say we planned it that way. Not really, but just happened to be our book of business, and that continued for the last year and a half, 2 years. Now we're seeing the commercial sector rebound. And the military continues to be strong. So we've done well.
And what drives sort of the demand for the test stands? I'm going to circle back to technology because that's my bailiwick. But what sort of increases or decreases the demand for the test stand? Is it flight miles? Is it new planes going into service? Is it both? Like what's sort of driving that part of the business?
Yeah, it's both. So you certainly, airlines or overhaul shops need to stay current with new engines coming out and new components. So there's that. But I can think of a project we have on the floor right now in checkout, happens to be for Lufthansa, German airline. And that has capabilities for fuel controls going back to the 1960s, 1970s, right up through current fuel controls, right, that are just a few years old. So these airlines have big fleets, and they have to support planes that are pretty old and pretty new.
So do they typically, this may be a very nerdy in the weeds question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So if I've got a test stand already and so presumably it covers, presumably I've been using some type of testing for the stuff I've had since the 60s and 70s. Yeah. When I buy a new test stand to take care of the new stuff, do I usually try and get it like an all-in-one? Or do I just sort of keep multiple stands?
Generally multiple stands. And, test stands don't last forever. Ours last arguably too long because they're such high quality. It's not unusual for us to have a test stand that's 30 years old. Okay. And still works great. But maybe they're looking for some new technology. Maybe they're looking for some automation, replacing what was analog with digital now. Yeah,
so you're getting some of that. So I want to circle back to the technology. So you sounds like you've been able to use a little bit of the technology to help in some of the areas, but it hasn't been quite the same. Sounds like you'll probably go back to more of the in-person stuff once that's more practical.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And we things opened up starting in November. So we've had the folks from Lufthansa from Germany now over to Bristol within the past month. We sent someone over to France within the past month to Air France, and then Lou and Michael from our family, they were at the Dubai Air Show just within the past couple of weeks too. So it's great, and they also visited Turkey, Turkish Airlines, a key customer. Yeah,
there you go. So Bauer's back in the skies.
We are, which is great.
So I want to ask you a bit about recruiting outside of engineering. So you've done a lot with the University of Hartford and other schools. When you think about your manufacturing plan and recruiting there, anything you guys do to sort of do some skills recruiting or stuff?
So, just like with engineering, on the manufacturing side, it's highly skilled workers, and this isn't assembly line type work. And so whether it's a sheet metal technician, a welder, a machinist, hydraulic assembly, electricians, highly skilled. We'll tap into some local schools. Bristol Tech is one, and where we've had good success bringing people into Bauer. I'd say generally, though, on the manufacturing side, it's we're looking for talent that have a few years of experience, and so maybe someone was a diesel mechanic. And there's transferable skills from something like that into our hydraulic assembly area.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So somebody that's working on trucks or something like that?
Yeah, and can, our assembly folks are following drawings. But there's a certain amount of knowledge, creativity, artistry that happens with assembly. And so you have to think outside the box. And that just doesn't come overnight, right? It comes with experience. And so someone who's been a mechanic, maybe a diesel mechanic, kind of knows the tricks of the trade, and it turns out to be a good background for us.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk a little about the family aspect of Bauer. So just talk a little bit your family, its relationship to Bauer, how many people are in the business, interested in that?
Yeah, so currently it's Lou as president, myself as COO, and then Michael as VP of Global Aftermarket and Customer Support. Third generation, because our dad, Lou Auletta Sr., was owner, president for a number of years. He started with Bauer back in 1970. I had the opportunity to buy it in 1980. Sold it in 1990 to a large corporation from Illinois, and then Lou bought it back about 20 years ago. So real exciting. I mean, what a journey.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. And so now, I was at Bauer for about 5 years right out of college, but I'm not an engineer, Ari. So I'm a liberal arts guy with an MBA, but after 5 years, I went into healthcare most of my career. But tremendous senior level position at United Healthcare in operations, and then about 4 years ago, came back to Bauer and to be VP of Operations and now COO. What's exciting is Michael and I now being so involved with the company. We're actually, each of us are 10% owners. Lou is 80% owner of the company. I have 4 children. One is probably off to medical healthcare type career. But the 3 boys, I'm thinking, may have an interest someday in the company. They're in high school now, and maybe engineering, but it could be business, it could be anything. And I'd love for them to also get involved with the company.
That'd be really cool. So let's just take one step back before we go forward. So your dad works there for 10 years.
Yeah.
And what opens the door for him to buy it in 1980?
Yeah, it was just kind of being in the right place at the right time. Previous owner had to sell it for various reasons, and my dad was chief engineer at the time, and he was given. Actually, he started as chief engineer, and then by that point, he was probably general manager of the company, but. Probably never dreamed of being able to buy the company. High leverage buyout, took out a second mortgage on our house, little ranch in Torrington, Connecticut, and kind of put it all on the line, right? But certainly turned out to be a good decision.
It worked out.
It worked out great.
Usually when you bet on yourself, good things happen. So he has the business for 10 years?
Yep.
And then in 1990, he decides he's going to sell?
Yeah, so Lou was just coming out of college a few years before, graduated Lehigh University as an engineer. And so he was in the company, pretty much running the company at that time. And a large corporation from Illinois. The company wasn't for sale. Bauer wasn't for sale, but they made an offer that we couldn't refuse. So the family sold the business.
Okay.
And so Lou stayed on the entire time. I was involved with the company at that time.
Oh, so you had been working there?
I had been for a couple of years.
Okay.
Yep, out of college.
Doing 'cause you weren't an
marketing.
engineer. Okay,
Yeah,
so
more
business
marketing,
stuff.
business
Yep.
on that side. And then after we were acquired, I continued with some marketing, also did a lot of HR work, a lot of recruiting for the company. And then I left to go off into healthcare, and Lou and my father stayed on. Lou has worked at Bauer his whole career. So Lou has never left the company.
And was he running like whatever it was, the division, or was it Woodward?
Woodward Governor Company. That's right.
Yeah. So Woodward. I read the 100th anniversary brochure. It's right in there.
Yeah.
So was he kind of like the general manager of that site for Woodward, basically?
He was. He was primarily sales, I think, at the time. So after Woodward bought Bauer, they brought in a general manager from Illinois to run the company. So Lou moved into more business development and sales. And then he had the opportunity to buy it back 20 years ago.
How did that?
It's a great question. I think it had changed ownership a few times. So from Woodward, I think it went to at least one, if not a couple, different owners.
Meaning, because Woodward sold the Bauer business, or
That's
the
right.
Woodward business?
Woodward sold the Bauer business. So I think it was actually owned by a British company at one point during that span, that 10-year span. And then whoever owned it at the time was looking to sell it, and Lou was still involved. He just knows the business, right? He knows test equipment, has the fantastic relationships with customers around the world, and that's what it's all about, is relationships. So he bought it back.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
And so now here we are 20 years hence. So how much has the business changed in the last, say, 20 years?
So tremendous growth. First of all, we've moved. So back when I worked at Bauer, the first go around, we were in Farmington. We've been in Greater Hartford for 105 years, but we were in Farmington at that time. When Woodward bought us, we moved to Avon, and then we were there for maybe 10 years. And then when Lou bought the company back 20 years ago, he put up a new building in Bristol.
Which is where we are today.
That's where we are today. And you're probably going to go there, but we just broke ground 2 weeks ago on a 30,000 square foot addition. So we're more than doubling our manufacturing space, which is really exciting. So the growth plans for the company are huge, and it's been, the company has grown every year for the last, I don't know how many years.
So how big was the company in 1990, employee-wise or whatever, versus what it was in 2002 or whatever?
Yeah, probably 60-ish, maybe 65 employees back then. So it's been good, incremental growth to where we were up about, before the pandemic, we were up to maybe close to 110 employees. And now we've scaled back to just under 100. Never laid anybody off, just through attrition. We scaled things back a little bit. I think now with the new building going up, growth plans around that, we'll probably look to add 20, 30 employees here over the next few years. We're about a $30 million company now, and over the next 3 years, our goal is to be a $50 million a year company.
There you go. I mean, nice to have goals and big plans.
You bet.
How have you found it going from manufacturing to healthcare, insurance, another big Hartford industry, and back to manufacturing? I'm curious about that journey.
It's the learning curve is engineering and manufacturing, right? So the transferable skills are operations. Yeah. It's recruitment and it's retention. It's issue resolution. It's building teams. It's process. Continuous improvement, right? All those things. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I did a lot with lean, with operational excellence, and black belt type strategy and whatnot. So actually, a tremendous experience, but great background. I don't think I would have been ready for that VP of operations role at Bauer. Too many years before when I did return 4 years ago.
Yeah, so talk about how you've thought about building that culture. Did you take stuff away from your time away from Bauer to bring back in terms of how you think about driving the culture? Maybe you learned stuff you didn't want to do, but how do you drive culture at Bauer?
Yeah, it's all about employee engagement. United Healthcare, to their credit, was huge into employee engagement. It's just invested a lot in people, and that's the culture we have at Bauer too. It's part of it is family-owned business, and there's just a lot of investment in people and a lot of flexibility with people too. Just understanding that balance, understanding people's personal lives too, and that they do have a life outside of work. But our culture, based on our values at Bauer: integrity, taking care of our customer, knowing our business technically. Those are the three values that actually came from Frank Bauer back, in the 1950s when he was involved with the company.
Kept the same sort of values?
Same values to this day, those three. Yep, integrity, know your business technically, take care of your customer. And I think people, when you come to work at Bauer, whether it's engineering or in the shop, people know what our values are. Our employees know, and they have a passion for all that, for understanding our customer and treating each other with respect, but really understanding what it means to serve our customers.
When you think about engaging employees, right, so important. How do you actuate that? How do you invest in people?
So a lot of it is through a good onboarding program, through training and development. career path. We've moved people up in the organization. We always look to do that first. And there's lots of examples how people have started maybe in a technician role and worked their way into engineering and even senior engineering positions. People who maybe come into shipping and receiving and work their way into on the shop floor into assembly, or into purchasing, or into tech pubs. I'm just thinking about different examples in my head of employees. I could tell you, rattle off a dozen names of people that we've moved up in the organization. So that's a big part of it. But it's understanding what motivates people, and it has to serve our interests as a company. But it's really important to understand career development too.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I did want to ask you about the aircraft simulator.
Yeah. So that temperature simulator. So 1916, Bauer starts not in aerospace, but as an electrical contracting firm in Hartford. Then we start making commercial hot water heaters. And then in the 1950s, late 1950s, take a job with Pratt & Whitney to build a temperature simulator. And back then, you had to test temperature for components and sensors, specifically sensors, at 30,000 feet. And at 30,000 feet, it's
cold.
about minus 80 degrees. And so how do you do this? And Pratt came to us to solution. And we built this temperature simulator with baths, actual silicone baths, and to get down to that temperature.
Meaning you got the silicone cold, and then you put stuff in it to make it colder?
That's right. And because we had technology, we had engineers that knew heating and refrigeration and all this, we were able to design a temperature simulator with different wells to simulate the different temperatures. So that temperature simulator, we don't make that anymore. Now everything's electronic, right?
Sure.
It's kind of maybe similar to a digital thermometer versus mercury thermometer. Technology has changed everything.
So it all started with a temperature simulator.
That's right, for Pratt. And to this day, Pratt's one of our customers, as is Collins Aerospace, right? So a lot right here in Connecticut.
It's just really cool how, you try something new, you look at an opportunity, you take it, and look what that decision has led to, all these years later. I just think it's amazing and really good stuff.
It is. And, everything, it evolves too. So some of our products today didn't exist maybe 10, 20 years ago, but we make brake test stands. If you think about any moving part on an aircraft, we make an oxygen mask test stand.
Yeah.
I mean, these are things, again, that have to work, right?
Yes.
And there's no option for them not to work. We make a toilet test stand because a toilet has a very complex system, and that has to function all the time also at 30,000 feet. So we have wastewater, but a toilet test stand.
So you've really branched out beyond even just the what we would think of as core components to other components inside the plane, which, look, an oxygen mask when you need it, to your point. If you depressurize, it's going to be a real problem if the oxygen mask doesn't work.
That's right. That's exactly right. So yeah, and I think we'll continue to look for complementary products as we grow the company. Maybe something we design and develop could come by way of an acquisition, which we always have our eyes open, especially now that we'll have the capacity to grow.
Has that been something you guys have done in the past?
We have not, but we're taking a more serious look at that just in the past couple of years.
To see about what you can do, sort of augment through another opportunity.
That's right. It would probably, have to be within our wheelhouse, but I think something complementary to our current test equipment business.
Listen, I think Bauer's just a great, Connecticut success story, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Mark. I'm going to switch to our rapid fire round of questions to round this thing out. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Ari.
All right.
Yeah.
Red Sox or Yankees?
Oh, Yankees all the way.
Oh,
yeah.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks. Big fan.
Staycation or exotic destination?
I'm going to say staycation. Kind of a family guy.
Yeah, keep it local.
Yeah.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Oh, SUV.
Do you have a favorite business book?
I have two. So Traction and great all around. And then it's a simple one, but who moved my cheese, right?
That is it. That's one I've been meaning to pick back up. That's one that's a good one to get reminded of.
It is. It's a good refresher.
Yeah, no doubt about that. If you could do anything in the whole world and it had to be something other than be the COO at Bauer, what would you do?
You know, I think it's going to sound a little ironic, but a commercial airline pilot. So, you know, it's probably because I grew up with a dad who owned Bauer, who was in the business, in this aerospace business, and I always wanted to be a commercial pilot. Certainly went a different direction, right, even though I'm still kind of in the same industry.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
What's something, Mark, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
So, early in my career, and it probably even goes into my childhood, from my grandfather. He said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen twice and talk once. So you have to be a good listener. And you know, I try to do that with my family, with my kids, and certainly our employees. Really important skill to have.
Yeah, that's a great one. I've always heard you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. They should be used in that proportion, right? So exactly, kind of the same thing. What's something, Mark, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you went back and told young Mark and he'd listened to you, you think it really have a positive impact on his life?
Something that I learned later in my life
that you tell your young self.
Yeah, I say to be humble, right?
Yeah, humble's good. Gotta make sure we keep our eye on the ground, feet on the ground.
Yeah, so important. You know, certainly, especially when you get experience, you become more successful. You have to stay grounded.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Ari, thanks so much for having me.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.